Hi guys, thanks for tuning in. In this video I'll be going over my personal tutorial on how to actually disinfect and clean the high touch points of a car's interior, as well as a couple touch points on the exterior, but also then use some car cleaning supplies to take that cleaning stuff off, because the chemicals in the cleaning products are actually very harsh. You don't really want those products to sit and stay on the material for long term. So without further ado, let's get into it. So it's a two-step process, what I do. For step one, my preferred choice are any sort of disinfecting wipes, because the material is already baked into the wipe. You're not spraying it, making a mess. For this first step, you can also use disinfecting spray. You're going to want to use a microfiber towel with that disinfecting spray, or you can even use just some soap and some warm water, and make sure that it's very lathered up, because the soap itself actually breaks down viruses, and you don't really need any disinfecting if you do have a lot of soap. But this is definitely my first choice. Like I said, the disinfecting material is already baked into a wipe, so you're not spraying it. Now, once you disinfect, you're going to want to go to a product made for cars to maintain the condition of whatever you're coating. In this case, my preferred choice is a detail spray. This is from Adam's Polish, and that is going to be with a microfiber towel. You can also use glass cleaner. That will work perfectly fine. You can use car interior cleaner. You can use leather cleaner. But I like the detail spray because it dries with a perfectly matte finish. So let's get started with this tutorial here. So I'm actually going to start out here on the outside of the car, and the first thing I'm going to bring up is the key fob. Now, if you're someone who has a smart key and doesn't touch this, it's always in a backpack or a purse, leave it in there. You're not going to get any germs on it. You don't have to clean it. If you are someone who's touching these buttons often, you're just going to want to wipe it with the disinfecting spray or the wipes. You don't have to end up covering that in detail product. But you are going to want to clean this up if you do touch it a lot. Now, going from there, I want to point out the door handles are probably your number one most touched item on the exterior of the car, especially the driver's door. So you're going to want to take your wipe and specifically clean the inside portion of the door handle where your hand is touching often. Now, after letting that product sit for about 2 to 3 minutes, because it does take a couple minutes to actually disinfect, you can go ahead, do the other door handles as well. But what I'm going to do now is take the detail spray, get a little bit of that on there, and then with a very soft microfiber towel, I'm basically going to kind of push that around, therefore removing the disinfecting wipe material and protecting the car paint at the same time. And specifically on this exterior door handle where it is, shiny paint, I am trying to blot it. I'm not trying to swipe, because if there is any dirt, you will end up smearing that into the finish, and you don't want to do that because that will cause scratches. Alright, so moving on from the handles, I would say the next most touch aspect of the exterior is going to be the trunk handle. Now, if your car is a newer car, specifically an SUV, you might have the kick to open feature. So if it does have that, that completely eliminates any sort of touching involved with actually opening the trunk. So I would genuinely suggest starting to get used to that, especially around this time of the year or with what's kind of going on in the world right now. But that being said, while we have this open, you are going to have in some cars buttons to close it back up, or you will have a grab handle. So you are going to want to give that a wipe down where you would be grabbing it to close, or those buttons. And again, you got to let that product sit there for a couple minutes to actually do its job. So let's close that up. Now, again, most of those cars with the kick to open also feature kick to close. So we can try that. and therefore eliminating any sort of touching of the buttons. While we're back here, you do have the little rubber pad. Most cars these days have that, so you are going to want to wipe that down because, again, that is a high touch point. And this will just eliminate the germs that might end up staying there on that. Excuse this car's filth. I do need to wash it, so I apologize about that. Okay, so again, after a few minutes, let that product do its job. I spray on a little bit of the detail spray and then just wipe that in. I wouldn't even bother doing this to the outside rubber handle because that does see a lot of elements. So that's pretty durable. And as you can see, this stuff dries a perfectly matte OEM finish, which is my favorite aspect of that detail spray. All right, so moving on to the interior. A majority of your focus here is going to be all of the driver's main touch points. So we got, your interior door handle. You have your unlock and lock switches, driver memory if you are using that a lot. You got your door pull on the interior as well. You have your window switches, your mirror controls, your trunk release. If you're using your seat controls often, you want to wipe those as well. And then obviously you are touching your seatbelt quite often too. It's going to be hard to do this with the camera, but you're going to want to use two hands, kind of use one hand to wipe this up and down, the whole area where you're kind of grabbing it most of the time, as well as the buckle, and then where you actually click the buckle in as well, because you are touching that quite often. Now again, just like before, after letting it sit for a minute or two, you get your detail spray and you kind of spray this a good amount on the door, and you're just want to wipe that in until it's a matte finish. Now, one thing to note is if your car has glossy trim or glossy wood, you're not going to actually want to swipe with the cloth. You're going to want to blot it on those areas because that material has a tendency to scratch very easily. So just be cautious of that. Take note on what type of material your car has. This one has a matte finished wood, so that's not a concern here. But some cars you are not going to want to swipe with the cloth because that shiny wood and the black piano trim, that scratches very easily. So I finished wiping the detail spray in and it looks fantastic. And now let's move on to the rest of the interior. So now we're in the cockpit of the car. We already did everything on the driver's door. From this point, your steering wheel is a big touch point, so you're going to want to give that a wipe. Besides the steering wheel, you got high touch points as your turn signals and your headlight controls, which are here and here on this car. You have your windshield wiper controls. You have your HVAC controls. You have your start stop button, which some cars again might not have. You have your central radio controls. If your car is a touchscreen, you're going to want to wipe that as well. But with that, you're going to want to be careful. You're going to want to not really swipe with the disinfecting spray. If anything, I would kind of, again, blot it and then give it a nice quick spray with the detail spray. And don't swipe too hard, but swipe it enough to make sure it dries properly. From there, you also have your transmission shifter, which you definitely want to give a wipe. You have your emergency brake, whether it be a button or a pull. Your radio controls. If you're up here using your sunroof controls a lot, your reading lamps, your mirror, where you open the mirror. Just be honest with yourself about where you are touching in the car. And you have to clean your high touch points because that's where there's a chance for germs to settle. So let's show off the steering wheel. Basically just get that disinfecting spray and kind of get into it. Get the buttons on both sides. Get the whole rim. Alright, so once again, after letting the disinfecting product sit for a couple minutes on the material, you're going to want to now get your second step and apply it. In the interior, I genuinely recommend not just going crazy and spraying this, because you're going to get overspray on a lot of the other stuff you're not trying to clean. So what I like to do is I spray it actually onto the cloth pretty liberally. And then from that point, just kind of remember the area where you sprayed. And that's what you're going to want to rub in to the surfaces here. Alright, so let me get going on this. I'll come right back with you guys. So once you've applied it, you kind of want to flip the rag over, use a dry side, and then buff it or rub it until that matte finish reappears. So here's the finished product on the wheel. Looking great. Now, one thing to also note is just pay attention to your finishes in your interior. Because if you are, again, rubbing a lot of shiny black plastic, shiny wood, that stuff has the tendency to scratch. So with that material, you want to spray the rag and blot it until it's basically dried up. You again, if you are swiping it back and forth on that shiny stuff, all you're really doing is causing lots of little micro scratches, and that's something you'll see over time in bright sunlight. Right angle, it's going to catch you and you'll get very disappointed. So just take note of that. Your stocks and your knobs. HVAC controls. Radio controls, transmission. Now basically just doing the same thing I did to the wheel on the center here. Again, just going over all the areas that I disinfected. Okay, so I just finished rubbing in the detail spray, and this is our final finish here. Everything's looking good. And again, this is just something I generally like to do when there's something like, you know, what's going on right now with the virus during cold and flu season. I am, you know, sharing cars with some other people. So this is just a peace of mind type of thing. It takes, you know, 5, 10, 15 minutes out of your day. And do it maybe once a week. But I hope you found this helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to leave comments down below. And thanks again for watching.